The desert sun scorched the edges of the Canadian Rockies as Sergeant Alex Hawk Mercer trudged through the arid training zone. His eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his cap, scanning the horizon where jagged peaks sliced the sky like broken glass. Heat shimmered off the sand, and every step threatened to sink into the fine dust. Hawk had been here before, countless training exercises, countless hours, but something about today felt different. At the far end of the range, near a cluster of steel targets, he saw her. A lone figure crouched over a Barrett .50 caliber rifle, its polished barrel glinting in the harsh light. Her hands moved with careful precision, adjusting the scope, tightening screws, checking the bipod. She wore a tactical vest over a black tee, her sleeves rolled up, revealing toned arms streaked with dirt and sweat. Hawk stopped dead in his tracks. He wasn't expecting anyone, certainly not someone like her. Her hair, a dark cascade tied loosely at the nape of her neck, framed a face that bore both focus and calm. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, tracked each movement of the rifle with the kind of obsession only the truly gifted possessed. He cleared his throat. "Need a hand." She didn't look up. "Unless you can hold steady at 1,500 meters, I've got it." Her voice was low but firm, carrying an unshakable confidence that made Hawk take a step back. Hawk's heart skipped a beat. She was different, not just competent but intimidating, the kind of person who made you reassess what you thought you knew. And yet, something about the way she handled the Barrett with a quiet reverence and careful study suggested she had a story, one that demanded respect. "I'm Hawk," he said, offering a hand. She glanced up briefly, one eyebrow arched, then went back to the rifle. "I'm Riley," she said, "and this is mine." Hawk studied her. There was a discipline in her posture, a precision in her movements that made him realize she was no ordinary sniper. Most rookies struggled with the Barrett, but she handled it like an extension of herself. Every screw tightened, every scope adjustment made with a surgeon's patience. "You're experienced," he said cautiously. "I've had time." Her voice was clipped, almost defensive, but there was a flash of something beneath it, a hint of pride maybe, or the shadow of a story too long to tell in words. Hawk sensed immediately that she carried weight beyond the range. Military weight, personal weight. He wanted to ask where she'd learned to shoot like that, to unravel the mystery that clung to her like a second skin. But before he could, the wind kicked up, dust swirling around her boots. She lifted the rifle, scanning the horizon with a practiced eye. Hawk followed her gaze and froze. Far, far off in the distance, a tiny silhouette smaller than a bird in flight hovered near the crest of the mountain. Hawk squinted. "That's impossible." Riley didn't answer immediately. She lowered the rifle slightly, her face unreadable. Then, almost casually, she said, "It's not impossible if you know your numbers." Hawk blinked. "Your numbers?" She smirked, a flash of something dangerous in her eyes. The kind that make a 1,500-meter shot feel like a warm-up. Hawk's pulse quickened. He had heard stories, legends whispered through barracks about snipers who defied physics, who held shots that no one else could dream of. But he had never met one in person. And now, standing before him, adjusting the Barrett with such intimate care, was a woman who had done exactly that. Before he could process it further, Riley slung the rifle over her shoulder and started walking toward the ridge, her movements light but purposeful. Hawk hesitated for a heartbeat, then followed. His curiosity burned hotter than the sun overhead. "Wait," he called out, trying to mask his growing awe with a casual tone. "If you've held that kind of shot, why are you here alone?" She didn't answer. She only glanced over her shoulder, her eyes sharp as knives, and said, "Some things are better proven than explained." Hawk swallowed hard. He had no idea what he had just stumbled into, but he knew, instinctively, that this woman, this Riley, carried a secret that could rewrite everything he thought he knew about snipers, skill, and sheer audacity. As they approached the ridge, the wind whipped harder, carrying the scent of dust and pine. Hawk felt a shiver, not from the cold but from anticipation. Whatever Riley had accomplished, whatever she had survived, was about to reveal itself. And then from the other side of the ridge came the faintest, almost imperceptible echo, a sound that made Hawk freeze, every nerve alert. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't wildlife. It was the unmistakable ping of a distant shot. Hawk's eyes widened. He looked at Riley, who was already kneeling, scanning the horizon with calm intensity. And then, for the first time, she allowed a flicker of emotion, something sharp, something electric, to pass over her face. "You hear that?" Hawk asked, barely breathing. Riley didn't answer. She only whispered, "That's my past calling." The words hung in the air like a storm ready to break. Hawk realized with a sinking thrill that he had just stepped into a world few ever saw. A world where distance, precision, and courage collided, and where Riley had already proven herself beyond measure. Then she dropped to a prone position, adjusting the bipod of the Barrett. Hawk crouched behind a nearby rock, heart pounding, barely daring to breathe. She dialed in her elevation, factored in the wind, calculated the trajectory with an uncanny fluency that seemed almost unnatural. Hawk could feel the tension radiating off her, a calm storm coiled into precision. The faint vibration of the earth beneath them seemed to sync with his heartbeat. He realized he had never been this close to someone who understood weaponry, physics, and patience to this degree. And then Riley whispered something that made him freeze. "Distance doesn't scare me, people do." Before Hawk could ask what she meant, she exhaled sharply, fingers tightening on the trigger. The sound of the distant shot echoed again, sharper this time, cutting through the wind and the rocky terrain. Hawk's stomach dropped. "That was you?" he asked, disbelief threading his voice. Riley's eyes, narrowed in concentration, flicked to him. A small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "Not yet, but soon." Hawk swallowed hard. Something told him that today, under the sun-baked peaks, he would witness more than skill. He would see a story of human limits, determination, and perhaps history being rewritten. And then, just as the wind howled across the ridge, Riley's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and froze. Hawk noticed the tension immediately, the way her hands trembled for a fraction of a second, the way her jaw tightened. She looked at him, eyes blazing, and said quietly, "They know I'm here." Hawk's blood ran cold. Who knew? And more importantly, what were they going to do about it? The ridge felt suddenly smaller, the mountains sharper, the air heavier. Hawk realized that he hadn't just stumbled upon a sharpshooter, he had stumbled upon a storm. And storms, once unleashed, never left anything the same. Hawk's mind raced as the words, "They know I'm here," echoed in his ears. The mountains, once a vast expanse of practice terrain, suddenly felt like a cage. His instincts, honed through years of military training, screamed that danger was closer than it seemed. But it wasn't just fear, it was curiosity, a pull he couldn't resist. He had to know her story. Riley moved with uncanny calm, adjusting the Barrett .50 caliber rifle on her shoulder. Every motion was deliberate, precise, like a dancer performing a routine where every step could mean life or death. Hawk followed, keeping low, the coarse dirt scraping at his knees. "You're not exaggerating about your numbers," he said cautiously, breaking the tense silence. "That shot, you really hit it." Riley didn't answer immediately. She glanced at the distant ridge, squinting as if recalling a memory she had buried deep. "2 years ago," she began slowly, voice low, almost reverent, "in a war zone you'd never believe existed, I held the longest confirmed sniper shot in history. 3,540 meters, over 2 miles. Hawk's jaw dropped. He'd read about legendary snipers, the kind whose names were whispered like ghosts in barracks, but he had never imagined meeting one in person. 3,500 meters, he repeated, disbelief lacing every syllable. Riley nodded. The wind, the humidity, the Earth's rotation, every factor had to be calculated. One mistake, one misjudgment, and I would have missed, or worse. Her eyes darkened. Or worse than missing. Hawk felt the weight of her words. He had trained for precision, yes, but this was on a level that seemed impossible. She had stared death in the eye, measured it like a ruler, and walked away. "And yet here you are," Hawk said, trying to mask the awe in his voice. "Why hide in the Rockies, off the radar, fixing a Barrett by yourself?" Riley's lips curved into a faint, tight smile. "Because sometimes skill attracts attention you don't want, and some people, they don't appreciate the kind of power a sniper holds." The wind howled through the ridges, carrying dust and pine needles. Hawk noticed her eyes flick to the horizon again, scanning, calculating. Every muscle in her body was coiled, ready. He realized she wasn't just talking about past war zones. She was aware of something right here, right now, that most would never notice until it was too late. "Who's after you?" Hawk asked, keeping his voice low. Riley didn't answer at first. She crouched, resting the butt of the Barrett on the dirt, checking the scope. Then, almost casually, she muttered, "The kind that doesn't like legends existing outside their control." Hawk's stomach tightened. That was no abstract threat. That was tactical. Someone had tracked her, followed her, maybe even tried to challenge her skill, and she had been ready for them all. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't flinch. She glanced at the screen, her expression unreadable, then tossed it into the dirt without a word. Hawk raised an eyebrow, but before he could comment, a shadow moved across the ridge. "Move," Riley snapped. She lunged forward, dragging Hawk behind a jagged boulder just as a round kicked up dust where they had been standing moments before. Hawk felt the shockwave in his chest. Someone was shooting at them. His pulse hammered in his ears. Who? "No time," Riley interrupted. She set the Barrett, adjusted the scope, and whispered, "Watch." Hawk had never seen anything like it. Riley's finger hovered over the trigger with a terrifying stillness. The world seemed to shrink around her. The wind, the noise, the flying dust, all disappeared, leaving only her, the rifle, and a target miles away that no ordinary human could hope to hit. She exhaled slowly, and the shot rang out, echoing across the peaks. Hawk's stomach dropped. He hadn't seen where it landed, but he knew, somehow, instinctively, it would hit. Riley slung the rifle over her shoulder, eyes flicking to Hawk. "Did you see it?" she asked. Hawk shook his head. "No, I didn't even how." She shrugged almost nonchalantly. "Numbers, calculation, experience, and maybe a little luck." Before Hawk could respond, the wind shifted, carrying a faint metallic sound. A vehicle moving fast somewhere over the ridge. Riley froze. Hawk noticed her jaw tighten. "They found me," she whispered, "and they're not just interested in my record." Hawk swallowed, "Then we stopped them." Riley's gaze swept the horizon, eyes sharp and cold. "We don't run, we don't hide, we fight. But first, you need to understand what you're up against." Hawk nodded, even though every instinct in his body screamed danger. He had followed soldiers into firefights before, but nothing had prepared him for this. Being side by side with someone whose skill could rewrite history, while invisible enemies closed in with lethal precision. Riley adjusted the scope again, checking her elevation and the angle of the sun. "That shot I told you about," she murmured. "It wasn't just for the record. It was to prove a point that one person, one bullet can change the outcome of a war, and sometimes the same principle applies off the battlefield." Hawk realized then that she wasn't talking hypotheticals. Her life, her skill, her existence, everything had attracted attention, and now he was part of it, whether he wanted to be or not. The shadow on the ridge moved again, closer this time, faster. Hawk's breath caught. "They're coming," he said. Riley didn't flinch. Instead, she lowered herself into a firing stance, Barrett ready. Her eyes scanned the ridge, calculating distance, trajectory, every variable Hawk didn't even know existed. She exhaled slowly, and Hawk felt the tension tighten in his chest like a coiled spring. 3,500 meters, she whispered to herself, almost reverently. "I can do this." Hawk realized she wasn't talking about the past. She was talking about what was coming, about the danger heading straight for them. And then from the far ridge, a glint of metal reflected the sun. A sniper. A drone. Hawk couldn't tell, but Riley's eyes locked onto it with a terrifying calm. "This is no longer a game," she said quietly, her lips tight with focus. "If we survive this, you'll know exactly why legends exist." Hawk felt the blood in his veins freeze. Whatever came next, it wouldn't just test skill. It would test survival, trust, and the edge of human capability. And then Riley whispered, almost like a secret to the wind, "They think they know me. They have no idea." The mountains held their breath with them, dust swirling, the sun harsh, the wind carrying a silent promise of confrontation. Hawk realized with a chilling clarity, the real story wasn't the shot she had held in history, it was what she was about to hold now. And he had front row seats. The shadow on the ridge moved closer, a jagged silhouette against the blazing sun. Hawk's chest tightened as he crouched behind the jagged boulder, sweat trickling down his temple. The metallic glint he had seen earlier was no trick of the light. Someone trained, was stalking them, moving silently but with deadly intent. Riley adjusted her Barrett .50 caliber rifle with the calm precision of a surgeon, her dark eyes narrowing on the distant figure. Hawk could feel the intensity radiating from her, a combination of focus, anticipation, and controlled ferocity. Every muscle in her body was taut, ready to react to the slightest movement. He realized with a shiver that she wasn't just a sniper, she was a predator in her element. "They're good," Hawk whispered, trying not to startle her. "I mean really good." Riley didn't respond. She scanned the horizon again, her fingers tightening around the trigger. "They don't know what they're about to face," she murmured. The enemy sniper, or whatever it was, paused, then shifted position, glinting metal reflecting the sunlight. Hawk's stomach knotted. He had trained for ambushes before, but this felt different. The air itself seemed heavier here, charged with tension. Riley exhaled slowly. "Stay low," she instructed. "Follow my lead, don't move unless I say." Hawk obeyed instinctively, dropping flat against the rough earth. Dust coated his hands and knees, scratching at his skin, but he barely noticed. His attention was entirely on Riley. The way she moved, the way she calculated, the eerie serenity in her eyes. She adjusted the scope with meticulous care, factoring in the wind, the angle of the sun, the humidity, and something Hawk didn't understand, the subtle shift of the earth itself. Every variable was accounted for. "Distance?" Hawk asked, his voice a barely audible rasp. 1,700 meters, Riley replied without looking away. "Just a little further than my longest confirmed shot, but today it's personal." Hawk felt a chill. Personal. That word carried weight. It wasn't just about skill or reputation. Someone out there had crossed a line, and Riley intended to make them pay with precision and finality. The distant figure moved again, this time slightly crouched, scanning for targets. Hawk's pulse hammered in his chest. He had no idea what to expect. Then, in an almost imperceptible flicker, Riley's lips curved slightly, a shadow of a smile. "Watch closely," she whispered. Her finger hovered over the trigger. Time seemed to stretch. Hawk felt every heartbeat, every grain of dust, every flicker of light in the mountains. The world had narrowed to one line, Riley, the Barrett, and the target. She exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the canyon, the echo rolling off the distant peaks like thunder. Hawk's stomach dropped. He couldn't see the result. Distance and dust obscured everything, but he knew instinctively it would hit. The distant figure froze. Hawk caught a flicker of movement, then nothing. Silence, except for the wind whipping through the peaks. Hawk's breath came in short, ragged bursts. That was," he began, but Riley cut him off with a sharp shake of her head. "Don't celebrate yet," she said. "They're not done, they never are." Hawk's mind raced. How could one person carry such skill, such control, and still appear so human? There was no hint of arrogance, only focus, only determination. and yet he sensed an undercurrent of danger, something far more insidious than a rival sniper. From behind a nearby ridge, a low rumble began. Hawk's stomach sank as he realized it wasn't just a single adversary. Vehicles, lightly armored, moving fast, kicking up dust, were approaching. They were closing in fast. "They've got support," Hawk whispered, his voice tight with tension. Riley didn't flinch. She adjusted the scope again, scanning, calculating. "Good," she said simply. "More variables, more fun." Hawk blinked. Fun. How could anyone consider being hunted in a mountain range, outnumbered and outgunned, fun? But Riley's confidence was infectious, and for the first time, Hawk realized he could trust her instinctively. "Cover me," she said suddenly, moving her rifle into position, sighting along the scope. Hawk crouched behind a boulder, heart racing, watching the approaching vehicles. The first of them crested the ridge, a matte black truck moving with deliberate speed. Hawk's pulse hammered as Riley exhaled and fired. The shot rang out like a cannon, the barrel of the Barrett recoiling against her shoulder with a precision honed through years of experience. The lead truck shuddered violently, tires skidding over the rocky terrain, then toppled over the edge of a ridge with a deafening crash. Hawk's mouth went dry. He had seen destruction before, yes, but the sheer scale of control Riley wielded stunned him. "Move," she snapped, slinging the rifle over her shoulder as the remaining vehicles accelerated. Hawk followed, keeping low, heart pounding in sync with the engines of the approaching convoy. They darted between jagged rocks, Riley leading with an almost preternatural awareness of the terrain. Every step, every dive behind cover, every motion was calculated to the second. Hawk struggled to keep up, muscles burning, lungs screaming, but the adrenaline carried him forward. They paused behind a massive boulder as the convoy roared past, only a few hundred meters away. Hawk dared a glance at Riley. Her eyes were calm, unwavering, yet beneath the surface he glimpsed something darker, an edge honed by survival, danger, and necessity. "They underestimated me," she said quietly, almost to herself. "They think skill is just numbers. They don't understand instinct, patience, or resolve." Hawk felt a sudden kinship, an understanding he couldn't articulate. He had trained for moments like this, yes, but he had never witnessed someone elevate skill into an art form, where life, precision, and psychology intertwined seamlessly. "Are we safe?" Hawk asked cautiously. "Safe," Riley repeated, eyes scanning the horizon. "Safe is a lie, but alive for now, and alive means we can fight back." Before Hawk could respond, a flicker of movement caught his eye, another shadow moving differently, more deliberate than the first. He froze. Riley's eyes followed his gaze and narrowed. "They've got a sniper on foot," she whispered, "and they're not just any sniper." Hawk's stomach dropped. He had thought they had dealt with the threat, but now he realized the fight had only begun. Riley's calm facade didn't waver, but Hawk could see the tension beneath the surface, the way her hands tightened subtly, the way her jaw clenched in anticipation. She slung the Barrett back over her shoulder. "Stay close," she said, "because what comes next is going to test more than skill, it's going to test guts." The shadow moved again, closer this time, and Hawk realized with a sinking sense of dread that they were about to meet the person who had tracked Riley this far. A sniper who wasn't just skilled, but dangerous, relentless, and intent on proving a point. Hawk swallowed hard. He had no idea what he had just stepped into, but one thing was certain. By the end of this encounter, nothing would be the same. Riley took a deep breath, her finger hovering over the trigger. Her eyes met Hawk's for the briefest instant, and he saw it. A silent promise, a warning, and a challenge all at once. Then she whispered, almost like a secret to the mountains themselves. "Time to see if legends are worth chasing." And with that, the ridge held its breath as the first true battle of skill, courage, and survival began. The mountains fell silent for a heartbeat, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Hawk crouched behind the jagged boulder, heart hammering in his chest. The dust still swirled around them from the overturned truck, but it was the shadow moving across the ridge that froze him in place. Riley didn't flinch. She crouched, adjusting the Barrett .50 caliber rifle once more, her hands moving with the calm precision of a master sculptor. Hawk had watched her work, seen her hit impossible shots before, but now, under the pressure of a real lethal threat, she seemed untouchable, almost superhuman. "They're coming for me," she said quietly, almost to herself. "They've underestimated me before, they won't again." Hawk swallowed hard. "How do you know you can take them?" Her dark eyes met his, sharp and unwavering. "Because I don't just shoot, I anticipate, I calculate, I survive." The shadow on the ridge shifted, subtle but deliberate, and Hawk's stomach twisted. He couldn't see the figure clearly, but the glint of metal in the sun told him one thing: they weren't amateurs. This was a sniper, trained and deadly, moving with the same patience and lethal precision that Riley embodied. Riley exhaled slowly, then whispered numbers under her breath: wind, speed, distance, angle, trajectory. Hawk couldn't follow them, but he sensed their significance, the razor-thin margin between life and death. "They've got range, but I've got time," she muttered, her lips barely moving. "And time is my ally." Hawk watched as she took aim, settling the Barrett against her shoulder, scope aligned perfectly. Every muscle in her body was tensioned like a bowstring. Hawk had seen soldiers hesitate, falter, panic, but Riley didn't even blink. Her eyes were locked on the ridge, tracking movements smaller than a rabbit darting through the brush. The enemy sniper shifted again. Hawk could see the silhouette now, lean, angular, moving with deadly purpose. They had spotted them, and the realization struck Hawk like a punch to the gut. "They're going to fire," he whispered, pressing himself against the rock. "Let them," Riley replied, almost casually, but Hawk caught the edge in her voice, a warning wrapped in steel. "Because if they fire first, it ends badly for them." And then it happened. A single shot cracked through the air, far too fast, far too precise. The bullet struck the boulder inches from Hawk's shoulder, sending a shower of rock chips across his face. Hawk yelped, scrambling backward, heart slamming against his ribcage. "Stay down," Riley barked, voice sharp and commanding. She exhaled, adjusted the scope again, and fired. The shot echoed across the mountains, a thunderclap of precision. Hawk's stomach dropped. He hadn't seen the impact, but instinct told him it had hit. The enemy flinched. "They're moving," Riley whispered, almost under her breath, tracking the shadow as it disappeared momentarily behind a rocky outcrop. "But they won't escape." Hawk realized that the mountain, once a vast, empty training zone, had become a deadly chessboard. Every rock, every ridge, every shadow could hide an enemy or reveal an opportunity. Riley was playing a game he couldn't even comprehend, anticipating the opponent's moves before they were made. "They're good," Hawk muttered, awestruck. "Not good enough," Riley replied, voice calm but deadly. She took another deep breath and fired. Another shot rang out, echoing like thunder across the peaks. This time Hawk caught the faint shimmer of impact. A piece of the ridge crumbled, a clear mark of her accuracy. The enemy sniper froze, reassessing, then shifted. Hawk's pulse raced. "They're not giving up," he said. Riley shook her head slightly. "They're learning, and that's their mistake. By the time they anticipate me, it'll be too late." Hawk's eyes widened as he realized what she meant. This wasn't just a gunfight. It was a battle of wits, patience, and calculation. One wrong move, one misjudgment, and either of them could die instantly. Suddenly, the shadow moved closer, breaking cover more boldly this time. Hawk's heart raced. He realized they were being drawn into an intentional trap. The ridge offered little cover for escape. Hawk glanced at Riley, but her expression was unreadable, calm as ever. "Trust me," she said softly, but with steel in her voice. Hawk didn't hesitate. He followed her lead, moving low and fast, ducking behind rocks and boulders, every nerve on edge. The enemy fired again. Bullets whined past their heads, kicking up dust and dirt. Hawk felt the heat of one passing dangerously close. His hands shook, not from fear but from adrenaline. Riley's eyes flicked to him for a brief instant. "Focus," she said. "Fear will kill you faster than bullets." Hawk nodded, trying to steady his breathing. He had trained for emergencies, for firefights, for ambushes, but nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing except the unwavering presence of someone who had done the impossible and survived. And then, almost imperceptibly, Riley shifted her aim. She exhaled slowly, her finger caressing the trigger. Hawk watched as her entire body seemed to melt into a single, fluid motion, breath, heartbeat, sight, and trigger perfectly aligned. The shot cracked. Hawk felt the ground vibrate beneath him. Dust rose from the distant ridge. Hawk's stomach dropped. The enemy sniper staggered, then froze completely, collapsing behind cover with a muted thud. Hawk's jaw went slack. He had seen impossible shots before, but this was beyond comprehension. Riley's calm, deadly efficiency had just neutralized a target that could have ended them both. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. Instead, she exhaled, slinging the Barrett over her shoulder. Her dark eyes scanned the horizon, wary. "One down," she murmured, "but more are coming." Hawk felt the weight of her words. This wasn't just a duel. This was a hunt, and they were in the crosshairs of a predator no one else could see. The rumble of vehicles grew louder in the distance. Hawk glanced around, realizing they were still exposed, the ridge offering only temporary sanctuary. He felt fear creeping in, but he also felt a strange surge of respect, awe, and something he couldn't name for Riley. She was more than a sniper. She was a force of nature, precise, relentless, untouchable. And then she whispered something that made Hawk's blood run cold. "They think this is a game. They don't know the rules." Before he could ask what she meant, a sharp metallic ping echoed from behind them. Hawk turned in time to see a shadow dart across the ridge behind a boulder. The fight wasn't over, not even close. Riley's eyes narrowed, and Hawk realized with a sinking chill that the real battle, the one that would test every ounce of their skill, courage, and survival instinct, was only just beginning. The mountains seemed to hold their breath, dust swirling, wind whipping, the sun blazing overhead. Hawk realized with a jolt, the moment they survived, or didn't, would define everything that followed. And Riley would decide how far the legend stretched. The mountains had fallen into a strange, eerie silence after Riley's perfect shot. Hawk crouched behind the jagged boulder, sweat running down his face, heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. He had survived firefights before, but nothing like this. He had just witnessed someone not merely survive, but dominate an impossible situation with calm, terrifying precision. But the momentary silence made his nerves tighten further. He knew instinctively this was only the eye of the storm. Riley's words echoed in his mind. "More are coming." He looked at her. She was scanning the ridge, every muscle coiled, every sense attuned. Hawk had a rare, uncomfortable clarity. Riley wasn't just waiting to defend herself. She was calculating, planning, anticipating every move, every threat, every angle, things he couldn't even comprehend. "They're not just snipers," she murmured, almost to herself, voice low but carrying that steel-hard certainty. "They're organized, coordinated, trained for one purpose, me." Hawk swallowed. "Why you?" he asked, tension threading his voice. "What did you do to draw this much firepower?" Riley's dark eyes flicked to him. "I survived when I shouldn't have. I held a record no one else could, and some people hate that. They fear what one person can do when no one else believes it possible." Hawk's stomach sank. This wasn't just a hunt. This was a vendetta. The enemy wasn't here to negotiate or chase glory. They were here to erase a legend that Riley embodied. A faint rumble in the distance caught Hawk's attention. Dust kicked up along the ridge, revealing movement too organized to be random. A convoy, several vehicles moving in formation, rounding the ridge with deliberate speed. Hawk's pulse quickened. "They've brought the whole team," he whispered, voice tight. Riley didn't flinch. She slung the Barrett over her shoulder, crouched, and scanned the horizon again. Her fingers brushed the trigger, almost absent-mindedly, but Hawk could see the electricity beneath the calm exterior. "They've underestimated me before," she said quietly, "and it's about to cost them." Hawk's stomach knotted. He had trained for ambushes and firefights, but nothing had prepared him for facing an entire coordinated team in the mountains, while the clock of survival ticked with every heartbeat. The convoy moved closer. Hawk could see figures stepping from vehicles, rifles at the ready. Tactical gear gleamed in the sun. They weren't amateurs. They were professionals, lethal, precise, and prepared to hunt Riley down. Riley exhaled slowly. "Time to remind them why I exist," she murmured. Hawk barely had time to process her words before she dropped to a prone position, Barrett leveled on a distant target. Hawk followed instinctively, crouching low behind a boulder, but it felt like stepping into a maelstrom he couldn't control. Riley's first shot rang out, echoing across the peaks. A distant figure flinched, collapsing behind cover. Another shot, another echo of deadly precision. Hawk's breath caught. He had seen skill, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. Riley wasn't just defending herself, she was controlling the battlefield. The enemy team adjusted quickly, spreading out, moving in coordinated patterns, attempting to flank. Hawk's pulse hammered. He knew any hesitation could mean death. "They're trying to pin us," he whispered, barely audible. Riley's eyes flicked to him, sharp and cold. "Then we don't stay pinned," she said. "We move, and we hit back hard." The mountains became a living battlefield. Rocks flew, dust rose, and the sun blazed overhead as Riley fired with deadly rhythm. Each shot was precise, each movement calculated. Hawk could see the fear ripple through the enemy team, their confidence wavering under the unrelenting accuracy of one sniper. And yet, for all her skill, Riley's expression hardened. Hawk realized that this wasn't just a fight of bullets. It was a battle of wills, of intelligence, of survival instinct honed through years of impossible experiences. One enemy sniper, more confident than the rest, broke cover and fired. The bullet whined past Hawk's shoulder, kicking up rock dust. Hawk froze, adrenaline spiking, heart hammering in his chest. "Down," Riley barked, dragging him behind a jagged boulder. Hawk felt the impact in the earth beside him. Close, too close. "They know my style," Riley said, eyes scanning the ridge. "They've studied my patterns. They think they know my moves." Hawk felt a chill. "And they?" he asked. "They're wrong." Riley's voice was flat, cold, and terrifying. She exhaled and whispered something almost to herself. "They've never faced this." The enemy team advanced. Vehicles moved up the ridge, figures darting between cover. Hawk realized with sinking dread that they had underestimated the skill it would take to survive, underestimated the force of one person who had already defied impossible odds. "Cover me," Riley said suddenly. Hawk nodded, heart racing, knowing that following her lead meant trusting instincts he barely had. She adjusted the Barrett with fluid precision, exhaled slowly, and fired. The first target dropped. The second faltered. Then, from the opposite ridge, another figure appeared, a sniper, fully trained, moving to flank them. Hawk felt his pulse spike. "They're professionals," he whispered. "Then we fight like professionals," Riley replied, calm, deadly, and unwavering. The sniper returned fire. A bullet struck a boulder just inches from Riley's shoulder, sending shards flying. Hawk's heart leapt into his throat. Riley's face didn't betray panic, only sharpened focus. "Distance doesn't scare me," she muttered, leveling the rifle. "People do." Hawk felt a chill. Those words were more than philosophy, they were a warning. This wasn't about skill alone. This was about courage, instinct, and the ruthless edge of survival. Riley fired again. 1, 2, 3 shots, each perfect, each disabling enemy movements, each shifting the battlefield in their favor. Hawk's jaw went slack as he realized the scale of her precision. But then from behind another ridge, a figure moved silently, faster than expected. Hawk's eyes widened, another sniper flanking them, closing the distance. Riley's dark eyes narrowed. "They've underestimated the storm they're chasing," she whispered. Hawk felt the weight of her words. They were outnumbered, outgunned. And yet, for the first time, he realized something terrifying and exhilarating at once. With Riley leading, they were far from defeated. The mountains seemed to hold their breath. Dust swirled. Sun blazed. Bullets cracked across ridges. Hawk realized that survival here wasn't just about strength. It was about precision, intelligence, and following someone who had mastered the impossible. And Riley was about to show him exactly why her legend existed. The sun burned overhead, casting long, jagged shadows across the ridge. Hawk crouched behind the boulder, sweat stinging his eyes, heart hammering in his chest. The enemy team was closing in, organized, relentless, precise, and every second that passed tightened the noose around them. Riley lay prone, Barrett .50 calibrated with terrifying accuracy. Every exhale, every movement, every heartbeat was a calculation. Hawk had trained for firefights before, but nothing had prepared him for this level of controlled chaos. He had watched her in action, but now he realized he had only seen a fraction of what Riley was capable of. "They're good," Hawk muttered, voice tight with tension. "Better than anything I've faced." Riley's eyes flicked to him, dark and sharp. "Good isn't enough," she said quietly. "Skill alone doesn't win a fight like this. Survival does." Hawk felt a chill. Survival was no longer just about bullets. It was about instincts, split-second decisions, and the weight of experience that only someone like Riley could carry. A distant echo of gunfire cracked across the ridge. The enemy sniper team was advancing with deadly precision, moving like shadows over the rocky terrain. Hawk felt the adrenaline surge, but he also felt the gnawing terror of realization. These people weren't just after her skill. They were after her history, her record, the reputation she had built under impossible circumstances. "They know my past," Riley said suddenly, almost as if reading his thoughts. Hawk turned toward her, surprised by the admission. "You what?" he asked. Riley's eyes darkened, gaze fixed on a distant ridge. 2 years ago, in a war zone no one talks about, I held the longest confirmed sniper shot in history. 3,540 meters. One bullet, one target. But that shot, it didn't just make history, it made enemies." Hawk swallowed. "Enemies." "They call themselves a network," Riley continued, voice low, almost bitter. "Specialists trained to erase anomalies, people who survive when they shouldn't. Legends." She paused, glancing at Hawk. "They've been chasing me ever since." The revelation hit Hawk like a hammer. This wasn't just a random ambush. It was a vendetta, a meticulously orchestrated hunt that had followed Riley from battlefield to battlefield. Every shot she had fired today, every movement, was not just survival. It was a response to years of being hunted. "Why haven't they caught you before?" Hawk asked, voice tight. Riley's lips curved in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Because I never gave them the chance." A sudden crack of gunfire echoed from the opposite ridge. Hawk instinctively dropped low, narrowly avoiding a bullet that struck the boulder beside him. Dust sprayed across his face. He realized with dawning horror that the enemy sniper team wasn't just skilled, they were relentless. "They're closing in," Hawk whispered, chest tight. "They think so," Riley muttered, adjusting the Barrett, eyes scanning, calculating. "But I know every move they're going to make. I've survived worse." Hawk realized she wasn't bragging, she was stating fact. The intensity in her eyes, the control in her movements, the calm in the midst of chaos, all of it spoke of someone who had stared death in the face and walked away repeatedly. The enemy team shifted, moving with deadly synchronization, attempting to flank them from both sides. Hawk felt the terror spike. They were surrounded, exposed, and outnumbered. "Cover me," Riley said suddenly, voice firm. Hawk nodded, heart hammering. She dropped prone, adjusting the rifle, scope trained on a distant figure moving along the ridge. Hawk could barely comprehend the numbers she muttered under her breath: wind, angle, distance, elevation. Each variable calculated with terrifying precision. Then she fired. The shot rang out like thunder, echoing across the peaks. Hawk's stomach dropped. The distant figure staggered, then collapsed. Riley exhaled slowly, her calm exterior never faltering. "They don't stop," Hawk muttered, watching the rest of the team adjust. "They shouldn't have underestimated me," Riley replied. Her voice carried steel-hard determination, but Hawk noticed a flash of something darker: pain, memory, the weight of years spent surviving. Hawk's mind raced. "Your past, it's still here," he said. Riley's jaw tightened. "It's always been here. That shot, that record, my survival, it left a mark. And now they've come to finish it." The mountains seemed to hum with tension. Dust whipped through the peaks, bullets cracked across ridges, and the sun blazed like an unforgiving eye overhead. Hawk felt the crushing weight of reality. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. Yet Riley moved like a force of nature, calm, deadly, precise. Then from a hidden ridge, a sniper's glint caught Riley's eye. Hawk noticed the subtle change in her posture, the shift from controlled precision to something sharper, colder, more lethal. "They've brought their best," she whispered, "and it's about to get personal." Hawk's stomach sank. Personal. That word carried weight beyond bullets or skill. He realized that whatever was coming next would test them both, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Riley exhaled slowly, laying the Barrett against her shoulder, fingers brushing the trigger. Hawk watched, transfixed, as she aligned her sights with uncanny precision. He felt a shiver of fear and awe. "This is what survival looks like," she murmured, "and you're lucky enough to see it." The enemy sniper moved again, faster, more confident. Hawk's pulse quickened. He felt the adrenaline spike, the terror of the unknown, the razor-thin line between life and death. Riley fired. Another shot rang out, echoing across the mountains. Hawk saw the impact, perfect, lethal, unerring. The enemy faltered, but more figures moved forward, closing the distance, relentless and organized. "They don't quit," Hawk muttered, heart pounding. "Neither do I," Riley replied. Her dark eyes locked onto a distant ridge. "And I never will." Hawk realized something then. This wasn't just about bullets or tactics. This was about history, survival, and the unbreakable will of one woman who had defied odds impossible for anyone else to survive. And then she whispered something that made Hawk's blood run cold. "They think they can finish me, but they have no idea what I'm capable of." Before Hawk could respond, a bullet whined past, kicking up dust inches from his shoulder. The enemy sniper had closed the distance. Time slowed. Hawk felt the weight of the moment, the culmination of years of hunting, years of survival, and the raw intensity of Riley's legendary skill. Riley's eyes narrowed, Barrett leveled, finger hovering over the trigger. Hawk knew, in that instant, that what came next would decide more than survival. It would define history. And then she whispered, almost like a promise to the mountains themselves. "Let them come. I'm ready." Wind whipped across the mountains, carrying the sharp scent of dust, gunpowder, and pine. Hawk crouched low behind a jagged boulder, heart hammering in his chest. Adrenaline pulsed in his veins like electricity. He had trained for chaos, for firefights, for impossible odds, but nothing could have prepared him for the raw, terrifying intensity of this moment. Riley lay prone, Barrett .50 pressed firmly against her shoulder. Her dark eyes were sharp, cold, unblinking. Every motion was precise, every breath controlled. Hawk watched in awe as she adjusted the scope, scanning the ridges with the patience and deadly anticipation of a predator. "They're regrouping," Hawk whispered, voice tight. "They're trying to flank us from both sides." "They'll fail," Riley said simply, voice calm yet filled with lethal certainty, "because they don't know what they're facing, and I do." Hawk swallowed hard. He had thought the earlier shots were incredible, but now he realized that was only the opening act. Riley wasn't just defending herself, she was orchestrating an impossible fight, controlling the battlefield with terrifying skill. From the opposite ridge, shadows moved, trained, coordinated, relentless. The enemy sniper team had regrouped, flanking them from multiple directions. Hawk's stomach twisted. Every instinct screamed danger, yet he couldn't tear his eyes away from Riley. "They're professionals," Hawk muttered, awe and fear mingling in his voice. "They underestimate experience," Riley replied. Her eyes flicked to him briefly, then back to the ridges. "And that's their fatal mistake." The first sniper fired. The bullet cracked through the air, kicking up dust mere inches from Hawk's shoulder. He tumbled back, heart racing. Riley's response was instantaneous. She adjusted the Barrett, exhaled slowly, and fired. The shot rang out like thunder, echoing across the peaks. One enemy figure staggered, another collapsed. Precision beyond human comprehension. Hawk felt his pulse spike. He had witnessed legends before, read about them, even trained under skilled marksmen, but this was beyond anything tangible. Riley was a storm contained in a human form, controlled, precise, deadly. The second wave advanced. Hawk could see their movement now, more figures emerging from the rocky terrain, closing the distance with intent. Hawk felt panic rise but remembered Riley's calm. "Fear will kill you faster than bullets." Riley shifted position slightly, scanning the horizon, calculating angles, wind speed, trajectory, and elevation, all in a split second. Then she fired. Another enemy went down, staggering, then collapsing behind cover. Hawk felt his jaw tighten. Each shot she made was a statement of control, dominance, and lethal precision. "They've got range, but we've got accuracy," Riley murmured, "and they don't see it coming." Hawk's stomach sank. Accuracy, yes, but this was more than shooting. It was anticipation, psychology, patience, instinct. Riley had mastered not just the rifle but the battlefield itself. Suddenly, a metallic glint appeared from a hidden ridge, another sniper closing in. Hawk's eyes widened, realizing the enemy wasn't just flanking, they were attempting to isolate them. The realization hit like ice. They had underestimated Riley's experience, but she hadn't underestimated theirs. Riley's lips curved into a faint, tight smile. "Let's see if they've learned anything." She exhaled, fingers brushing the trigger. Hawk watched as she executed a sequence of movements that seemed almost inhuman: breath, heartbeat, calculation, release. The shot rang out. The distant figure flinched, then froze completely, dropping behind cover. Hawk's pulse raced. Each shot she took was perfect, lethal, unerring. But the enemy was relentless. Figures appeared from every ridge, firing with precision, moving in calculated patterns. Hawk felt the pressure mounting. If Riley faltered, they were done. "They're closing in fast," Hawk whispered, chest tight. "They can't outrun skill," Riley replied, eyes narrowed. "And they can't outthink it either." Another volley of shots tore through the ridge. Hawk ducked instinctively, the sound of bullets snapping past like lethal hail. A fragment struck his arm, drawing a line of blood. Pain flared, but he ignored it, gripping his own weapon tighter. Survival instinct overrode fear. Riley fired again. Hawk saw the enemy stagger, the formation breaking, their confidence wavering under her unrelenting precision. Hawk's mind struggled to keep pace, trying to calculate the impossible. One woman holding an entire enemy team at bay with nothing but skill, patience, and terrifying focus. "They're adapting," Hawk said, voice tight. "They're learning from your moves." "I'm aware," Riley muttered, "which is why I've already predicted the next three." Time slowed. Bullets whined past, dust kicked up, rocks crumbled under gunfire. Hawk realized with dawning awe that they were witnessing a battle that defied ordinary logic. Riley's skill wasn't just technique. It was a living, breathing calculation, a chess game played at lightning speed under the most extreme conditions imaginable. Then from the far ridge, a sniper fired directly at Riley. Hawk felt the ground shake as the bullet struck mere inches from her shoulder. Riley didn't flinch. Instead, she exhaled slowly, recalibrated, and fired again. The shot rang out, echoing across the peaks. The enemy staggered. Hawk's jaw went slack. "They've underestimated the storm they're chasing," she whispered, voice low, deadly. Hawk felt a cold realization. He wasn't just witnessing skill. He was witnessing legend. Every shot, every calculation, every movement was proof that Riley wasn't merely surviving, she was dominating. But then from a hidden ridge, an enemy sniper appeared almost silently, faster, more precise, closing the distance with lethal intent. Hawk's stomach dropped. This wasn't just a flanking maneuver. It was a direct challenge to Riley, to her record, to her survival. Riley's dark eyes narrowed. She leveled the Barrett, fingers hovering over the trigger. Hawk realized with a jolt, this was the final duel, the ultimate test. One mistake, one hesitation, and it would all be over. The enemy sniper fired. Time seemed to slow. Hawk felt the wind shift, the dust whirl, the sun glare across his eyes. Riley exhaled, calm, lethal, unflinching. She fired. The shot echoed like a drumbeat of destiny. Hawk saw the distant figure stumble, then collapse. Silence fell, heavy, almost unreal. The enemy team's organized assault faltered, their confidence shattered. Hawk's pulse slowed slightly, awe and relief mingling. Riley exhaled slowly, Barrett slung over her shoulder. She scanned the horizon. Hawk realized then what he had been part of, a battle not just of skill, but of will, instinct, and pure survival. "They thought they could finish me," Riley murmured, dark eyes gleaming. "But they learned the hard way. Legends survive, and legends fight back." Hawk swallowed hard, chest tight. He had seen impossible skill, history rewritten in bullets, and yet he realized there was more to Riley than just the record. There was a force, a will, an unbreakable determination that transcended technique. The mountains held their breath, dust swirling, the sun blazing overhead. Hawk realized with clarity, what had just occurred wasn't just a fight, it was history being made. And Riley had written herself into legend again. Then she glanced at him, voice low but with a hint of challenge. "Ready to see what it really takes to survive?" Hawk's jaw tightened. He realized that the fight was far from over. Survival wasn't just about skill, it was about courage, trust, and stepping into the unknown. And now he was part of it. The mountains fell silent at last. Dust hung thick in the air, glinting in the fading sunlight like suspended gold. Hawk crouched behind the boulder, chest heaving, hands slick with sweat and dirt. Around them, the remnants of the enemy team lay scattered. Disabled vehicles, toppled rocks, and figures rendered motionless by Riley's unstoppable precision. Hawk's mind struggled to process what had just occurred. He had survived impossible odds, witnessed feats of skill that defied belief, and now, finally, he could exhale. But even in the silence, he knew the story didn't end here. Riley's legend wasn't just about the longest sniper shot in history. It was about the relentless survival, the focus, the intensity that had brought them to this moment. Riley sat back on her heels, Barrett slung across her shoulder, eyes scanning the ridges for any remaining threats. Hawk noticed something rare, a hint of fatigue in her posture. Even the most legendary sniper could not be completely immune to exhaustion, even under the adrenaline surge of survival. "They're done," Hawk whispered, voice trembling. We made it." Riley didn't immediately respond. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. Then, in a tone quiet yet commanding, she said, "This wasn't about making it, Hawk. It was about proving one thing: control, patience, and survival. That's how legends endure." Hawk felt a chill. He had trained for crises, for moments when split-second decisions determined life or death, but nothing had prepared him to see the scale of Riley's endurance. He had witnessed precision beyond comprehension, yet it was her control over herself, her environment, and her instincts that had truly kept them alive. He stepped closer, finally daring to meet her eyes. "Riley, I don't even know how to thank you, or comprehend what I've just seen." She let a faint smile cross her face, the first real one Hawk had seen. Most people don't need to. Legends aren't about being understood, they're about surviving where others fail. Hawk's gaze drifted across the ridge, taking in the aftermath. Disabled vehicles lay at odd angles, jagged rocks splintered by shots, and the distant horizon stretched endlessly. For a brief moment, the mountains seemed to exhale, as if acknowledging the end of a storm unlike any other. "Do you ever get used to it?" Hawk asked, voice low. The chaos, the danger, the intensity." Riley's dark eyes flicked toward him, serious, almost somber. "You don't get used to it. You survive it. You adapt. And sometimes you become stronger because of it." Hawk felt the truth of her words in his bones. He had faced danger, but never with such precision, such calculated intent. He had followed someone who defied ordinary human limits, and now he understood what made her the longest-range sniper in history. It wasn't just skill, it was willpower, courage, and an unshakable sense of purpose. They moved from the ridge slowly, cautious, alert, even as the immediate threat had ended. Hawk couldn't stop glancing at Riley, trying to memorize her movements, trying to comprehend the sheer force of her presence. Every step, every breath, every glance was deliberate, honed by years of training, battle, and survival. Finally, they reached a vantage point overlooking the valley below. Hawk allowed himself to exhale fully, watching the sun dip behind distant peaks, casting long shadows across the land. "Do you ever think about leaving all this behind?" Hawk asked quietly. Riley's gaze remained fixed on the horizon, expression unreadable. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but the past doesn't let you. People chase legends for a reason, and I don't run from what I've become, I face it, every time." Hawk nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He realized that surviving alongside Riley wasn't just about bullets or tactics. It was about understanding someone who had transcended ordinary limits, someone whose life was defined by focus, precision, and relentless resolve. A soft rumble reached their ears, the distant sound of backup, approaching slowly but cautiously. The enemy was contained, but reinforcements might arrive. Hawk felt a flicker of unease, the reminder that the fight was never truly over. Riley exhaled, turning to face him. "Hawk, you've done well, you stayed calm, you followed my lead, that's rare." Hawk's chest tightened. I learned from the best," he said, voice tinged with awe, "and I wouldn't have made it without you." Riley studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "Good, because surviving today wasn't just about skill, it was about trust, and you proved that." For a brief moment, the weight of adrenaline faded. Hawk felt the sheer exhaustion, the physical toll, and the emotional intensity of what they had endured. And yet, beneath it all, he felt something else: respect, awe, and a glimmer of understanding about what it truly meant to be a legend. As the last rays of sun disappeared behind the mountains, Riley slung her Barrett over her shoulder and began moving toward the extraction point. Hawk followed, side by side, both of them silent but aware of the bond forged in the crucible of combat. Then, as they reached the edge of the ridge, Hawk finally asked the question that had burned in his mind since he first met her. "Riley, after all of this, what happens next?" Riley paused, glancing back at him. Her dark eyes held both intensity and something softer, almost human. "Next," she said, "next we survive, we move forward, and the world keeps watching." Hawk swallowed, realizing the truth of her words. Legends didn't end. They adapted. They endured. And the story of the longest sniper shot, the battles fought, and the survival against impossible odds would echo far beyond the mountains they had just left behind. Riley exhaled, slinging the Barrett over her shoulder with practiced ease. Hawk followed her lead, and together they descended from the ridge, leaving behind the chaos, the dust, and the ghosts of the battle. But he knew one thing with certainty. He would never forget what he had witnessed, never forget the woman who had defied history itself, and never forget the lesson she had taught him. That survival wasn't just about skill, it was about courage, precision, and an unbreakable will. As the night descended, the mountains held their silence. The wind whispered through the peaks, carrying the echo of a story that would be remembered. A story of precision, legend, and survival against impossible odds. And Hawk knew, with absolute certainty, that Riley had earned every single second of her legend.